Yeah, in Sweden, science enjoys great authority, especially in natural science. So it was a natural thing to do for the Swedish government to rely heavily on the experts. In fact, there has been sort of a discussion of whether the government is relying too much on its experts and leaving some of the initiative and the responsibility that the government should take over to the experts. So science is not a question, but of course what is special in this situation is that it's new, knowledge is evolving quite fast, but we also have huge risks, and evidence is preliminary and limited. So of course, as the knowledge increases, recommendations change, and that is not always so easily communicated. People who are familiar with science know that necessarily at this stage of research there is a lot of uncertainty, and there is a lot of complexities, and depending on how uncertainties and complexities unfold and intersect with each other, the situation becomes messy. But usually people expect clarity from science. So communicating uncertainty and complexity, both to policymakers and to the general public, can be difficult. But at the same time, doing this, communicating uncertainty and complexities in good ways, is essential to maintaining trust in both experts, but also politicians and the advisors to politicians. So I think that is a little bit special in this situation, that you clearly see something of the process of science. You don't only see the results, but you see also the process, and which involves uncertainties and complexities. As you may know, Sweden never went into a complete lockdown, and there were never any restrictions specifically for the activities of faith communities. We were subject to the same general recommendations as they were in place for other kinds of activities, which was basically that physical distancing, hygiene rules, and never gather more than 50 people at the same time. And we have applied that to our activities, church services, which meant that we didn't just cancel everything, but we tried to adapt. I say the church, there were two big Ds, two capital Ds emerged, the digital and the diaconal. So our deacons and our diaconal work stepped up very quickly to, for instance, assist people, elderly people, or other people in risk groups to assist them with getting food and medicine and things like that.
Well, shortly back to the regulations. Some people, including the World Health Organization, have praised the so-called special path of Sweden and considered it an ideal model for dealing with the pandemic. But my question is, was the price of this approach eventually not too high?
Well, I think the jury on this is still out. We simply don't know. We have had high numbers when it comes to people who have died, especially elderly people. And we have had a lot of elderly care facilities where the virus has crept in, which of course feels like something was missing. We should have been able to protect the elderly in better ways. What we need to have is a severe discussion about human dignity. Because Sweden, Actually, in Sweden, we have like mistranslated the UN Declaration for Human Rights. It says people are equal in dignity and rights, and in Sweden it's translated in equal in value and rights. And as a value, you can, like, this is a quantitative term, you can have more or less value, but dignity is either you have dignity or you don't have. I mean, it's more a qualitative term. So we need to have a commission. We're actually going to have in Sweden a Corona Commission, and I hope that they also will look into this more basic questions of human dignity. How have we upheld human dignity? What does it mean to uphold human dignity in a time of crisis like this? Religious practices, to put it that way, nourish hope, courage, and resilience. And these are important components in order to cope with the crisis and all that follows with crisis. Religious practice like prayer reassures you of the basic relationality that is characteristic for all of us, but that we tend to forget sometimes. We are related to God, the Creator, to the whole of creation, to our fellow human beings, and to ourselves. And prayer makes all these dimensions of our relatedness, so brings them to life, and thus nourishes hope, courage, and resilience. And of course, intercession, and knowing that in prayer you are united with people all around the world, gives a strength and assurance that is, I think, crucial to coping with a crisis. So that's why I talk about spiritual resilience. I mean, in this situation of reflection, because we have to ask, what is it that is the most important thing, and how do we really, really want to live together as people on this earth, as part of creation. I think giving time and space and language for all of this contributes to fostering a spiritual resilience. Now, the Swedish society is a society that has enjoyed a long time of stability. Remember that Sweden does not have any memories of being at war in the last century. So there is, as a whole, there is not an active memory of having to cope with catastrophe. So we need to make use of the strength and the wisdom of our spiritual traditions. And by that I mean that we can learn to live with fear. Now, if you have difficulties with fear, I think what we naturally tend to do is either to face up, to distract it, to get rid of it, or the other option is not to accept the fear and trying to get distracted from it. But neither distraction or distraction is a good thing in the long run. But I tend to empathize with Søren Kierkegaard, the theologian and philosopher, who says the one who has learned to be anxious, to feel anxiety in the right way, has learned the most important thing. And I think that applies also to uncertainty. if we can learn that, we have learned something very important. I wrote a little book, and the title is Impatient in Hope, Theological Questions in the Shadow of the Pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah, the theological questions, I think, that present themselves anew in the shadow of this pandemic is creation really good, in spite of the pandemic? How can we speak about good creation if there is this virus? What do we do about evil? And that applies both to natural evil and to moral evil.
The virus is a natural evil, not a moral evil as such. So is there a special argument for natural evils?
I think philosophically and theologically, the differentiation between natural evil and moral evil is helpful, but in practice, the difference is blurred more and more, which, I mean, climate change is a very good example. You can't really tell the difference anymore between evil that is purely natural and evil that is purely moral. Now, and of course, if you want to speak about creation as good, one way of putting it is where creation is both good and on its way of being good. And I think complexity research is quite helpful in understanding how crises and catastrophes play a role in bringing forth a world where you have both freedom and consciousness. And of course, that brings us to say, okay, seeing the patterns that make us understand why there is such a thing as a virus is not the same thing as giving it a meaning. We still have the pain and the grief and all of that. So the biblical tradition and the liturgical tradition of lament is very much necessary and a gift, actually. Well, some people say that the corona crisis is a rehearsal for what we are about to face in the wake of the climate crisis, and there may be something to it. There is some wisdom to be gathered here. I mean, just the insight that we very quickly and very powerfully could adapt to this crisis and change things is something that we can take with us when it comes to the threat of climate change. If we can change so much so quickly, why then can't we, in a slower pace, but equally powerful, mitigate the risks of climate change?